Welcome to the evening show with Jackie Brambles, and this is the part of the show where every night you and I get to cozy on in with one of our favourite artists of the 70s, 80s, 90s. And tonight, joining us for our great conversation, the frontman and co-founder of a band that meant an awful lot to me growing up as a kid in Scotland, and certainly one of the most iconic bands of the 80s. They sold over 60 million albums, had 5 UK number 1 albums, and I'm just so chuffed that he's able to join us tonight. He may be beaming in from his home in Italy, but he is the pride of Glasgow, and it's such a pleasure to welcome Simple Minds' Jim Kerr to the show.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Brilliant to have you with us, Jim. Let's start then with the most recent album, Direction of the Heart. It came out at the tail end of last year. You were touring, of course, last year. And like so many artists that I've chatted to over the past several months, it was really carved from the block of ice that put the whole world on freeze by way of the pandemic on lockdown. How did it all come about for you guys?
First couple of months we were in shock because we were on tour. We're about 10 days into, or 10 dates into what was going to be a year-long world tour. And then suddenly I was back home in Glasgow, queuing up outside Sainsbury's for the last cabbage. I'm thinking, what happened to my life? Didn't I used
What's
to be
going on?
Wasn't I a rock god 2 nights ago in Stockholm? So it took a few weeks to get over that, and then fortunately, the way we work, unfortunately, because of the technology and all that, we could get on with the songwriting, but it kept us creative, more to the point.
One of the tracks on Direction of the Heart is a reimagining of a track that you wrote, 45 years ago, Act of Love. It was the first song you ever performed on stage, right? Simple
Minds played our first ever gig in... well, they used to call them discotheques. I still like that word, actually, Jackie, but it was a discotheque.
It's very sophisticated.
A discotheque on a cold January Monday night in Glasgow. We walked on to the sound of our own feet.
Oh, no.
We didn't know if it would last for another 4 weeks, never mind 44 years. But the song we played that night was one of the first songs we'd ever written. A year later, by the time we got, it's a song called Act of Love. And a year later, by the time we got a record deal and stuff, the song got lost within the midst of a lot of other new material. And we always thought, that was a mistake. That was a great riff, that song. We'll go back to it one day. Well, having some time on our hands, as well as working on an album, we thought, let's go back to that riff and see if we can take the body of the original song and add on new parts. So therefore, you're really bridging the then and now. People seem to like the vibe of it. Sweet angel, call out. Don't want to speak.
Act of Love, reimagined for the 2022 new album Direction of the Heart, but it was the opening song on the night of the very first ever Simple Minds gig well over 4 decades ago, which just sounds insane to say, doesn't it, Jim?
I can't believe it. Until I look in the mirror, then I'm forced to believe it. I think, when did my granda come back? But I think he would asked us then what we wanted out of Simple Minds. We would have said, well, we want to be a great live band. That's first and foremost. We want to take it around the world, and we want to squeeze as much out of it as we can. And 44 years later, all of that has kind of come to pass.
Brilliant. Okay, well, let's go back then, back to your childhood. Grew up in Glasgow. Was it a very musical household? What do you remember of your mum and dad's musical tastes?
Well, funny, I mean, my mum, huge Beatles fan. And I remember every time there was a new Beatles single, I was especially reminiscent about that recently with the Let It Be documentary and such.
Yes.
I remember my mum getting the new single and doing the latest dance, and I would just jump around.
Get Back from the Beatles' Let It Be album, which Jim's mum would have been playing in the Kerr household when Jim was duking about as a 10-year-old. And we will be back with more great conversation from Simple Minds frontman and co-founder Jim Kerr next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles, where it's just you, me, and our very special guest tonight for our great conversation, Simple Minds' own Jim Kerr. So, Jim, before the break, we found out that your mum introduced you to the Beatles at a young and formative age. What about your dad then? Did he have similar tastes?
On my dad's side, it was more a kind of I think my dad had a few pals that were in Merchant Navy.
Right.
And as they travelled the world, they would come back with records, especially from America. And it would be blues and soul and, well, country as well. They called it country western then.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty much the music backdrop. My dad loved Little Richard and he loved Fats Domino and all of that. So that was really the music.
I found my thrill.
Fats Domino, Blueberry Hill, a favourite of Jim Kerr's dad as Jim was growing up in Glasgow. So you're getting that blues influence from your dad, you're getting the Beatles from your mum. So by the time you grew up a little and you got to buy your own first record, Jim, with your hard-earned pocket money, I'm imagining a kid with fairly sophisticated musical tastes. Do you remember what it was?
I do. I mean, I'd love to tell you it was really cool. You might remember.
Everyone says that. Don't worry. Don't worry. Everybody says that.
Okay.
Listen, mine was Cliff Richard, so we're starting in a good place.
They were a Scottish band called Middle of the Road, and the song was Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep. Bought in Woolworths. I mean, I tell people it was Ziggy Stardust, but just between you and I, Jackie, it was Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep.
Where's your mama gone? Where's your mama gone?
It was the first single ever bought by Jim Kerr when it was number one in 1971, Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep by Middle of the Road. So as you progress then into stroppy teenagehood, Jim, what came next for you?
Rolling Stones, I think, Brown Sugar. I mean, I think probably because I played it 200 times on repeat.
Yeah.
I mean, not that my parents didn't like the Stones, but by that time I was really getting into stuff. I was getting obsessed. And I do remember, I mean, it was also probably 11 o'clock at night, and poor Dad had to go up at 5 to go to work.
Fair enough. And did you start to, at that point, imagine that this might be a career path for you, or was it just not in your stratosphere that was even a possibility?
Never, not even remotely. I mean, to put it in context, we didn't even... I'd never met anyone who was in a band. I didn't know anyone who was in a band, but there was a gang of us at school that had started going to concerts, and as soon as I went to my first ever gig, which was Genesis, Peter Gabriel was on stage. Oh, I can't tell you. I mean, when you think of the performers that are, well, within about a space of 3 months, I saw Peter Gabriel on stage, I saw David Bowie on stage, Lou Reed, Brian Ferry.
Wow. I
mean, it really was. To say, it often sounds like an exaggeration when you say that it was life-changing. But it was life-changing because...
Well, what an education for you! What an education into what music to aspire to create.
There's always been that low. Chicken, wake up, we got to tidy.
Genesis with I Know What I Like got to number 21 in 1974 with Peter Gabriel on vocals, who made such a huge impression on a young Jim Kerr at his very first live gig that he saw in his hometown. And we will be back to continue our great conversation with Simple Minds frontman Jim Kerr next. Welcome back to the evening show with Jackie Brambles, where tonight we are so chuffed to have as our very special guest Simple Minds' Jim Kerr, beaming in from his home in Italy for a great conversation and so far a fantastic frolic through his musical memories. I don't always ask this question, but I get the feeling, Jim, you're a man unafraid to express his wounded inner teddy bear. Is there a song from your youth that reminds you, of heartbreak or of young, unrequited love?
Shall we go really soppy?
Yeah, go on.
10cc, I'm Not in Love.
Oh, I had that record.
You know, it's like, if ever they summed up that wistfulness, I mean, that song's amazing. And the idea of writing a love song with that title, I mean, what an amazing band they were, thinking about it.
How about picking the song that you feel changed everything for you, and then the one that you're the proudest of?
I mean, many people out there will know the success of Don't You Forget About Me, which to this day is, still an evergreen.
Oh, it's anthemic.
But the problem with that success was that it's like, well, what's next? Can you follow that up? After all, it had gone to number one in America. It had gone to number one, top of the Billboard charts. And we'd never had that kind of pressure before. And although we would never have admitted it to ourselves, it was definitely in the room when it came to working on what would be our next new stuff. I didn't think we would. The expectation, everyone, because everyone thinks, well, you did it once, you would do it again. But I was, as the weeks were going on, as the months were going on, I thought, we don't have anything that's going to compete with that level of success. And then I think last couple of days during the recording session, our keyboard player, Michael McNeil, came up with these chords that it sounded a bit like a hymn. And before we knew it, we had Alive and Kicking, which actually, Jackie, was a total failure. It only went to number 2 in the Billboard charts.
Oh, my. How did you live with yourself? How amazing. How amazing to kind of, recreate that magic again.
You turned me on.
Alive and Kicking, a huge hit for Simple Minds in 1985. Before we let you go, Jim, leave us with a favourite memory of a spectacular live gig, whether that was your own show or being part of a collective or watching somebody else in action, something just vivid that stayed with you over the years.
Well, one of the great things about being on tour, and you get, especially when you get to tour with other bands or playing in festivals and you get to see it up close. And I remember playing a festival in Germany, and Tina Turner was on the bill. She was finishing the night. We'd gone on just before, and it had gone well for us, and we were backstage, and it was all, we were so obsessed by what we had done and the reaction we had got and all that. And then in the distance, I just heard this noise, this shriek, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Tina Turner live. I mean, unbeatable.
Amazing. And to watch that from the wings, to see another artist go out there. Any particular song that you remember of hers?
I think that song was Steamy Windows, it was called.
Steamy Windows from Tina Turner, our final track chosen by Jim Kerr. Thank you so much, Jim, for taking the time for a natter. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as we certainly have.
Wonderful. Thanks again.
Much appreciated, Jim.
All right, Jackie. See you later.
Jim Kerr. What a lovely chap.